This is Dying Your Way.
Welcome back to the Dying Your Way Encore podcast series. Today, I am happy to revisit an incredible interview with an incredible man, Carlos Pomeda, who is a teacher and practitioner of yoga for over 40 years. And he is a very respected scholar in Sanskrit and religious studies, has a PhD in both. And he has spent his life exploring what many of us wonder about when we are faced with loss or illness or aging as mortality gets closer. And I share in the podcast that really what sparked my interest at the time that my mother got an Alzheimer's diagnosis was going to a course that he taught on karma, death, and dying. And I took mother to that course. She still had, enough of herself there to not only be part of it, but to enjoy it. And we just talk about a lot of those concepts in this podcast. And I think it can be a foundation for you as well in whatever it is that you may be going through. We focus on how our culture basically denies death and what it can mean to die well. So he's a delightful man, and you'll really enjoy this interview that I have with him. And leave your comments, like, shares, all of that helps get the purpose of this podcast, which is teaching death literacy out to the masses, and you can be part of that. Thank you so much. Enjoy. Hi, Carlos. How are you doing?
Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you.
Let me introduce Carlos to our listeners. This is Carlos Pomeda, and he has been a teacher and practitioner of yoga for over 40 years. And he's a master of Sanskrit and also religious studies. And you've had quite the journey. You travel all over the world and you're teaching now. And I believe you have a new book that's coming out as well, too. Yeah?
Yes, I'm actually working. I have several projects going, but the main one that I've been focusing on is a book about reincarnation, bringing not only the ancient teachings about it, but also all the contemporary research. There's very interesting, rigorous research from several avenues. And I want to put all of that together and also explain the whole mechanism of karma that underlies that. So I've been immersed in that topic. Well, I've been immersed in it for many years now, but very specifically now in the last few months.
So before we get started, I just have to share with you, Carlos, how synchronistic and meaningful it is to me to have this interview with you, because in 2004, my mother was visiting me in Oakland, and you were teaching the Karma, Death, and Dying course. And she had not been diagnosed formally with Alzheimer's yet, but we knew there was something going on. And we both took that course together and had no idea that would be a foundation and a support for me for the next 6 years of being her main caregiver, and my father's too. So, and here we are, 16 years later, and we're talking about the same subject. And for the listeners of this podcast, there are a lot of people that have a lot of questions, that are going through a lot of challenging times. And although a lot of it has to do with physical pain, I find that a lot of the pain is emotional, and sometimes that's worse than the actual physical pain. And there's always a spiritual element that seems to be with that. So I think you're a perfect guest to support everybody else the way you supported me so long ago. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to reconnect.
Yeah, it is. So one of my first questions is that a lot of people, our culture really is just in denial about death.
Yes.
And from your perspective, how does that denial affect someone going through the end of life?
Oh my God, it is so fundamental to really think about this. One of the things I noticed, which gives me a lot of hope, is that there seems to be a cultural change. There has been a tremendous amount of literature, which I was not aware of. You know, it's like in everything, once you start getting into a topic, you start uncovering more research and more resources and so on.
Yeah.
And now I have this impression that there has been really a shift, a very slow shift that's still going on culturally, where people are talking more about death and so on. Maybe that's also influenced by the whole baby boomer generation,
We're
right? That
dying. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So just to do the ostrich thing and pretend it's not happening is not going to help. Also, there have been movements for people to reclaim the space of death. I remember, for example, when my father passed away, this was in Spain, that I was really disturbed by how the state intervenes, you know, so that you're not, at least that's the situation there, you're not allowed to spend time in the wake, you know, saying goodbye to your dear ones. No, the state comes, takes the body to this particular place where they have all these showrooms where the bodies are in a refrigerated side of a glass, and then everybody else, all the visitors are on the other side of the glass, and that's
Are
it.
you saying the state of Spain
Yes.
does that?
Right, by law, when
Mm.
somebody dies, you have to call a funeral home, and then that's what they do. Right, first you go to these places. They're called sanatoriums, means where dead people are. So basically, the families come there. And these places are also, they're not centrally located, you know, they're a little bit farther away. It's like we want to push the thing under the rug, you know, we want to push it away. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to see it. So all the dead people, let them be there. And basically, you know, it's very limited. Like you're already not physically with the departed, the body of the departed one, right? But there's this separation. And then after that, the funeral home disposes of the body the way, you know, you've arranged. But I found it very disturbing because in traditional cultures, as you know, you know, saying goodbye to the person is a very integral part of how people
Yeah.
live. And I think this is it's a symptom, it's an indication of this culture of denial that you're talking about. So I do hope it changes, because I think death really helps you put your life in perspective, far from being something, you know, to be feared or to be, you know, like there's this sort of image of something very dreary and so on. Of course, there's the loss. That's a different thing, right? If you lose somebody, that's a totally different thing, loss and grief. But death itself is not something um, to be feared. You know, it's
Yeah.
something to be understood and to be contemplated and to be integrated, because we're all going to die.
I feel like a lot of the people that I've worked with, if they've spent, if that they can naturally get to a place of acceptance and that they're going to die, and that's when the pain and the emotional anxiety is lifted, because they get to that place of acceptance. And whether that's from religious beliefs or whatever, I feel like there's something actually even physiological that may happen in the dying process that supports us if we can get to that place, and if families can get to that place of letting the dying person go, you know?
Right. Right. You have there the pioneering work of Dr. Kubler-Ross, right, who talked about the stages of grieving. And the
Yeah.
last one is the acceptance. Something happens when you come to that acceptance, because you cannot fight with reality, right? I mean, you lose every time.
Yeah.
How can you fight with reality? So um, the thing is, how do we get to a place of acceptance? And here again, I think the culture has such a huge role to play. You know, how do we collectively, how do we deal with the reality of death? But also, you know, as my own body gets older, I've come to feel that there is also there's like a silver lining, I think, in old age.
Hmm.
Not that I
Tell us.
consider myself to be in old age, right? But getting there,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think is that as the body loses all the the exuberance of youth and so on, that your focus becomes more internalized, and also that then you come to see death at some point as a relief, actually.
Mm.
Which, by the way, is something very interesting when we look at the research. People like have near-death experiences and things like that. That's
Mhm.
how they describe it. It's a relief to get out of this rigid physical body, but
Mm.
particularly when it's old, it's a blessing. All of a sudden, you're free from this body, and so I think there's also like some wisdom, if you will, from nature.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
certainly, nobody wants to suffer, nobody wants to experience loss, but as far as just the fact, the biological fact of death itself, I think it's far from being a negative in itself. It's a liberation.
yeah, yeah. So if I mean, if we kind of got into Indian philosophy point of view, if the purpose of life is to know yourself, what would how would that relate to the end of life? And is it too late if you want to? I mean, if you're getting to the end of your life, is it too late to know yourself and have that experience?
Right. Well, this is why I was saying that I think the subject of death helps you to put everything else in perspective and actually to give meaning to life.
Yeah.
Because, for example, in my own journey, I realized the big shift that has happened, or one of the big shifts that has happened, is that before I used to see life from the perspective of this lifetime.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas now it's the other way around. My perspective is that this lifetime is a very small chapter in a much bigger journey of the soul.
Mm. Mm.
Here is where we get into the topic of reincarnation. Now, I have to say, for me, having been brought up as a Catholic, I was brought up with this idea that you only live once. And that always seemed to me tremendously unfair.
Really?
you know, I remember when I was a kid thinking, but nobody asked my permission if I wanted to be born. And now I'm being put here in this position.
Yeah.
And then when I came across these teachings about reincarnation, all of a sudden everything made sense. Okay, so we are here in a process
Mm.
of evolution. Life is like a school. We are here to grow. We are here to learn about our true nature. We're here to learn how to love others and so on and so forth. But of course, it's a matter of belief, right? What I have seen is that recently there have been a number of really important developments, as I said, in the research about reincarnation from several different directions. One of them is the near-death experiences.
Hmm.
There have been really interesting studies that show that there are many universal factors in the near-death experience that cut across cultures, genders, age groups, religious backgrounds, you name it. So there are some common threads. There have been even statistics about what are the experiences that people share, right? People who've had near-death experience. By and large, the large majority, I forget the exact percentage, but it's something, if I remember correctly, like 73% of people report a really positive experience and report not being afraid of death anymore after
Mm.
having such an experience.
Mm.
We look at the other area of research, which is with people who work in hospices and who work with the terminally ill and people who are making the transition and so on. And what they share from the experience of people who are preparing for death and then making their transition. Same thing. I don't remember the exact numbers right now, but they are like the immense majority of people comes to this point of, like you were saying before, of acceptance, of a peaceful frame of being, and so on. And they start seeing things that, of course, from a materialistic perspective, you think, well, this person is hallucinating. But the thing is, in these so-called hallucinations, which they call visions, they find out things that are factually correct that they didn't know before, right? So it cannot really be dismissed so easily as a hallucination because they find out about, other relatives who passed away and things like that. So it's very fascinating to start looking into this and seeing how many converging points there are. And then the other area of research, which is a very promising field, is with people who remember, particularly children who remember a previous lifetime.
Mm.
This
Yeah.
is actually much more common than I ever thought. But what happens is that very often the parents, when children start talking about something like that, the parents dismiss it and the child learns to block it very early on. But children in cultures that accept reincarnation, particularly countries like India, like Thailand, and so mostly in Asia, they recall, and very often they recall facts about their previous birth that then turn out to be correct. There was a great pioneer of these studies, the scientific study. He was a psychiatrist, Dr. Ian Stevenson. He was a pioneer. He was a professor at the University of Virginia. And actually, the University of Virginia has created a center, they call it for perceptual studies, where they're doing a rigorous scientific study of these phenomena, right? And their position I like very much, because they say, look, we cannot prove that reincarnation exists, but they take a phenomenological approach, which means here are these reports from people. And it turns out that these things that they're saying checked out, right? And things like their memory of our previous lifetime corresponds to birthmarks, all sorts of things like that are really interesting. Information that they couldn't know. Children who speak a different language spontaneously from the one that's spoken in their area, things like that. Their position is the hypothesis that best explains all this data is reincarnation, right? And they are doing fantastic work studying. Dr. Stevenson himself, before he passed away, collected more than 800 cases that are very tough to explain in any other way other than reincarnation. So it's been a tremendous amount of literature lately, and as I said, very rigorous studies that are looking at this phenomenon, and they give us a completely different idea of existence, because then this lifetime is just, as I said before, it's just one chapter in a very, very long journey. So then the question becomes, okay, what are we supposed to do here?
What do we do? What do we do with this information?
Right.
No, my dad had a near-death awareness, so he hasn't passed over yet, but he had a near-death awareness where, he was seeing relatives, in the corner of the room, and he was, oh, sweet, can you see? And he started naming off all of these relatives, and I don't, but I really believe you do,
Right.
Yeah, that is really common, but how wonderful that it's
But there's a fantastic
they're studying
book.
it,
There's a great book. It's in the UK. There's this psychiatrist called Dr. Peter Fenwick.
Peter Fenwick?
Peter Fenwick. He has researched particularly within hospices and again with people who help others who are dying and so on. Fascinating book. The book is called The Art of Dying. And
okay, yeah.
I found it really enjoyable, particularly reading it in airports. When you have your book and it says The Art of Dying, and you see people looking at you.
It's a conversation starter.
Exactly. It's really fascinating because, again, he has done, they distributed all these questionnaires to people, and they got several hundred responses. I think something like 600 responses that they've studied. And it's fascinating what people report seeing and their attitudes and how their attitudes about death change and so on. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Now, what if, we have a spiritual path, but a lot of people nowadays really don't even have a spiritual path. And a lot of people that do are quite fixed in what their belief systems are. And, none of us can say this is what death is, but what can they expect is it too late to have a spiritual path? What if the one that they think they believe doesn't? How does that work? I don't even know.
In Dr. Fenwick's research, he has found that your own cultural conditioning plays a role, which of course is not surprising, right? So
Mhm.
that your religious background, your expectations, all of that for a certain percentage of people shapes their experience.
Their dying experience. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, for example, I've seen testimonies of people who had the near-death experience, and they describe what they experienced and what they saw, what they felt. For example, in Christian terms, if that is their background. Same thing in Hinduism and Buddhism, because I've been talking about this topic all over the world, so I get to hear directly from people who've had experiences from many different cultures. And very often you find this, that your own expectations can actually shape the experience when that happens. On the other hand, there's also a large percentage of people whose experience is nothing like their conditioning.
Wow.
There was a famous case a few years ago, actually, of a gentleman who was, I think he was a Pentecostal. But anyhow, he was a little bit of an agnostic,
Yeah.
saying, well, I don't really know, how can I be sure? And he had an experience, a spiritual experience, when his brain was in a coma. And that totally changed. It was nothing like his expectations or his religious expectations, right? But it was very much typical of near-death experiences. And again, he came back transformed.
It was a good
Uh,
experience.
oh, it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah. Okay.
And with so many of the common traits that you see in other near-death experiences. And again, after he came back, he said he's not afraid of death anymore. In fact, he's dedicated his life to sharing his experience with others, right?
Mm.
So it has changed. That's a case where actually the religious views of the person change. Not that you have to give up your religion, but that informs, obviously your experience informs it with a new level of depth. So it's not that you need a religious experience or a religious belief, rather. But I think just what we need is an open mind. For me, that's the most
Right.
important thing.
Right.
Just have an open mind.
I'd often heard that you don't need a religion, to meditate, and it's just meditation is such a part of how I have, I guess, had some kind of personal growth is just through meditation. But I think you don't need a religion to meditate. You don't need religion
Right.
to sleep. You don't need religion to meditate. And you probably
Right.
don't need a religion to die either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay, one other question. Well, I have other questions, but what are some practical things from your point of view on death and dying, or Indian philosophy on death and dying, about how to die well?
Well, I would say the very first thing is meditate.
Yeah.
Meditation is now, it has become mainstream, right? And
Right.
because there's really like literally tons of research on the many benefits of meditation. But in connection to this subject, I think one of the great boons of meditation is that it helps you to be aware of yourself without reference to the body.
Mm.
So much of our self-image, if you think about it, and our identity is really body identity, right? We think
Right.
of ourselves in terms of gender or age or height or whatever. But those are attributes of the body, right? Not of the soul, not of the essence of consciousness that
Mm.
we are at our core. So meditation really, I think, is profoundly transformational in that it teaches you how to be and how to be in pure awareness without reference to the body.
Mm.
Actually, I remember many years ago when my mother took up meditation, the very first thing that she told me, I was very surprised. She said, "I'm not afraid of death anymore." And
Really?
it was quite remarkable because she had always been very afraid of death. But
Mm.
she's not afraid at all. In fact, she's in her 90s now, and we talk about death very openly, and she's not afraid of it. She's worried about suffering, right? Like that's something I find, like nobody wants to suffer. Like everybody said, well, I don't want to be sick and in pain, or yeah, well, that's understandable. But about death itself, there's no more fear. And that is something that I've seen in myself and in so many other people, that as you take up a meditative practice, in a way, it's like a small death, right? In the sense
It
that
is, yeah.
it is the death of a limited identity, little by little.
The anticipatory fear, I think what they call what your mother experiences, and that fear of going through the process itself and any pain or anxiety that might be,
Right.
nowadays, with one of the good things about modern technology, with medicine, is that you can be, all of the pain and the anxiety can be dealt with if you
Yeah.
have the proper palliative care, and
Right.
that's so much a part of
Right.
what we're trying to promote. But yeah, I think if you talk to the people who've had the near-death experiences, they have done it and they've come
Yeah.
back and they go, yeah, it's just not that big of a deal.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something. In the book that you're writing, what are some of the, are there things in the book that pertain specifically to the dying process or to death or?
Yes, it's also an important part of my intention, because I think we need, we come to the world, we don't come alone, right? We have help. And I
Yeah.
think when we depart, it's the same thing, right? And it's important to learn how to make the transition. So I have a whole section there with advice for the person who is there, of course, how you help others make the transition, how to be present with them, how to help them uh, deal with any pending issues that they may have, unresolved issues, right? Because what may trigger regret or sadness or whatever
Mm.
is having unresolved issues.
Yeah.
So that's a very important thing, as you know better than me, for the person who is helping, but also for the person making the transition. I find that I find that there's a lot of wisdom in the traditions,
Mm.
because ritual serves for yourself and also for the other person.
Right.
And there are a number of rituals that have that goal, which is to put you in a frame of mind where you are at peace and you can just let go and move on.
Right.
And I find in this regard, and also as a continuation to your earlier question about practices, I think it is very important to take time and reflect on our life and see if there's any unfinished business that we have or any regret.
Mm.
And if so, finding the way to become at peace with it. Because otherwise, when you are in your deathbed, it's not the moment to start dealing with stuff, right? So
No.
again, I think if we're living in a culture that taught us to actually think about death more, could help
Mm.
to get to this point of resolution and peace,
Yeah.
rather than trying to push it under the rug until it's too late to do anything about it.
So I'm going to get back to your book before we actually sign off, but I have one more question I've got to ask. So, Carlos, what is death?
Huh. Death really is just the body. It's just the body that, from an Indian perspective, using the traditional Indian language, it's a body whose source of prana or life energy is ends. This is part also of what I want to bring out in the book, showing the connection between the mental and the physical. Right, we're holistic beings. Everything is interconnected. What keeps the body connected to the soul, or vice versa, is this link that is called prana in
Mm.
Sanskrit. It means the vital energy. And what is it that keeps the vital energy connected with the body? What keeps this link? It's all the stuff, which again in Sanskrit terms we would say karma, that we bring to work out in a particular lifetime. And once that karma is worked out, right? So once we've experienced everything that we brought, we've done everything that we came to do,
Mm.
that link is broken. There's no more impetus for that vital energy to continue to revitalize the body. And so the mode of death, that's also part of your life experience. It's part of the karma, right? Using that language. But the moment of death from that perspective depends on when that sort of spool, if you will, of unresolved stuff ends. So this is the traditional explanation. But the moment of death then is the moment when prana actually withdraws from the body. And just like at night, when we go to sleep, there's something very similar that happens. The only thing is that the body doesn't stop living. But something similar happens if you watch the transition into sleep. It's your vital energy, it's your prana that does it, right? You don't do it.
Yeah.
We don't know how to do it. But prana literally draws you inside yourself into a mental world of dreams first, and then into the world of deep sleep. And then it's prana itself that in the morning brings you back into the body.
Oh, that's
the
so
process
beautiful.
of death
Just
is
thinking about
similar.
that to me is so beautiful. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor, because every day is like a microcosmic replica of the big cycle of the life.
Right, right.
So every night when we go to sleep is like a little death. Actually, in India, it's traditional that you wash yourself up in the morning, because it's like a purification after the death of sleep.
Purification
So it's an
after the
interesting,
death of sleep. I love that.
right?
Yeah.
When you wake up, you have to purify yourself.
Wow.
And it's the same thing, right? It's your prana that again brings your awareness back into the physical body. So death is like that. The only difference, of course, is a big difference.
You don't come back.
Exactly. You don't come back into the same body.
Does the prana die?
No, prana doesn't die, because prana is the manifestation of the soul. That's what life is, right? Life is consciousness, supreme consciousness manifesting itself. That power of consciousness, that's life.
And it goes with us wherever we go.
Right, because we are consciousness. So each one of us is an expression of that consciousness. So life expresses itself through each one of us. So that's why death doesn't really exist. It only applies to the body.
Yeah, you touched on it just briefly a little bit earlier about the specialness that we give to birth, and all of the help and everything that comes when someone is born, and again, and I think if anything that we can contribute is to get the message out that death needs that same kind of support and sacred energy, environment, and people around you that are celebrating a wonderful life and peacefully letting you transition to the next, wherever that is. So, oh, Carlos, I could talk to you forever and ever.
This is it's a hot topic.
It's a hot topic, and I think it's pretty pertinent. Well, before we say goodbye, though, number one, thank you so much for doing this.
You're very welcome.
So happy to see you again after 16 years. You look fantastic. It's really good to see you. So if people wanted to get hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach you? And give us the title of your book slowly one more time.
My book doesn't have a title yet.
Okay, forget about the title. Never mind.
As a working title, I have something like around the mystery of karma and the journey of the soul, but we'll see.
Okay, all right.
But the easiest way to stay in touch is with my website. Is my last name, pomeda.com.
POMEDA.com.
Right. So that's the easiest way to stay in touch. There's a contact page there. There's also a list. We don't send newsletter, even though it says newsletter. But whenever there's an announcement, we send an email.
Yeah. Well, okay. Have a very safe trip to Europe.
Thank you very much.
Give our love to Susie. And it's just great to have you again, Carlos, and be well. Thank you so much.
Great seeing you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Dying Your Way. If it's inspired you, then please spread the word. Leave a rating and review so others can find out about us. To learn more, connect with us on Facebook or our website at dyingyourway.com. A special thank you for the artist Mel Dobra for letting us use her song, Smoke and Flame, as the soundtrack of our show. I invite you to return, hear each episode, and be part of the conversation on death literacy. I am Claire O'Berry, and this is Dying Your Way.